Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Success. Continuing our theme on all things kind of fraud, risk, money laundering, obviously in the lead up to an event that we're hosting in August. I'm delighted to be joined by a very senior executive at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Jason Lane Sellers, who I was going to have the pleasure of meeting last week at an event in Johannesburg, but he was running around all over the place. I then had to go to another meeting and didn't make it back in time. So, Jason, sorry I didn't get to shake your hand and say hello, and this is the first time we've met, but it's good to meet you. I appreciate you're kind of in transit at the moment in Heathrow on the way to Pittsburgh. So thanks for joining. Thanks for making the time. I'd love to get a quick intro from you, and then I've got just a stack load of questions to ask you about this fascinating and incredibly complex world of fraud and maybe some risk and maybe some AML. But I know your specialist area is on the fraud side. So if you can give a quick intro, that'd be amazing, and we can dive straight in.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much. And yeah, sorry I missed you. Yes, busy up and down on stage last week, so didn't get time to shake hands too much. So I'm director of fraud and identity here at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, and I look after the whole of the EMEA region. So, Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well. And that kind of role defines our kind of both strategy, approach, but also provides kind of aspects of overview of expertise in the marketplace as well. So, as you can probably tell from the grey hairs this early morning, that I've been in the fraud space, should we say, for 30 years now, kind of fighting fraud, various different organisations, setting up departments, setting up solutions, best practice, etc. Worked with the industry, worked with associations within the industry about kind of sharing and educating on fraud as well. So it's been an interesting time.
Fantastic. Well, let's start with that point in terms of 30 years in the industry. How have things evolved? That's a broad question. I appreciate that, Jason. But how have things evolved from a fraud perspective? Things like the technology advancement has that put a whole different layer on sort of fraud to what it was 30 years ago? Obviously, there was still technology around back then, but how's the market sort of dynamic shifted, or how's the world of fraud shifted?
Yeah, it's funny within fraud over the years. It's kind of become one of my trademarks, saying there is no new fraud,
Okay.
but there's the fraud utilizing the new technologies. So they're taking advantage of the new techniques, new capabilities, digitalization of services, etc. When you deep down drill into the actual type of attack, it's very similar to what it was 5-10 years ago in terms of the methodology, but they're just using those capabilities. So, new application fraud, account opening fraud has always been there.
Yeah.
But again, it used to be in-store fake IDs, fake passports, etc. Now it's digitalized, fake digital personas, fake devices, spoofing of IPs, etc. The same with social engineering. The little kind of market street tricks, where or moving the cones around with the money underneath kind of scenario, hand-eye coordination, those kind of things. Again, many years ago. Now it's I persuade you that I've got a good investment, for you, or I've got a good business deal for you. Social engineer you, or can do a romance scam. Romance you online, digitally, remotely, very simply utilizing technologies and interacting with you and finding out details about you and what your buttons are. So, from I know we term fraud differently, so there's always new fraud terms, but when you drill into it, the same kind of base problems are there. So, accounts being opened, people being manipulated, account kind of manipulation and takeover, payment fraud, and kind of ultimately cash out of how they get the money out, out of individuals and out of corporations. That all kind of exists, but it's the framework now which makes it more intense, more interesting, because with digital particularly, the speed, the volume, the variation, the scale I can do that, and the global nature of that threat is very real.
I guess people in your roles and your colleagues and people within the ecosystem, it sounds like it's a bit of a kind of a whack-a-mole. You kind of knock one down and then two more pop up. Is there? Are you able to be proactive in terms of finding these moles that are going to pop up and giving them a whack or a clup before they actually appear? Is that impossible because of the nature of technology and people? hackers, becoming more sophisticated, using different types of networks, different types of attacks and threats and what have you. Is there a proactive approach to what you guys do at LNRS, as well as the reactive side as well?
Yeah, I think again, it's always been kind of my mentality is, it's a common saying now, but prevention is better than cure. In the
Yeah.
fraud industry, you can be very reactive, but if you're reactive, really, you're too late. So
Sure.
it's an aspect of kind of balancing that kind of reactive with the proactive, as you say. So taking that nature, prevention is better than cure. What can I do? What can I look at? What tools can I use? What systems can I use to be as proactive and preventative as possible? And then that allows you to focus on where there are still gaps and holes that are obviously going to be there, or you're going to discover along the way. And particularly, again, going to that kind of digitalization theme, as you launch new products and services, you can assess them for risk. You can put systems and tools in place to try and address that risk. But there may be something you've overlooked, or something, a hole still there that then kind of pops up, so you have to react to that and then rebuild.
Yeah.
But also that kind of situation of there are some things that you cannot stop. Therefore, that's going to be still a weak point, but that's where you can assign your resources to kind of have a look at that and focus on that point. So what we try and do, from a Lexis point of view, obviously, is we're looking to provide the solutions and technology to give you that awareness, to give you that insight, give that preventive capability to be proactive, so you can then focus your operational capabilities on what you need to, where you need to, as an important factor. Um, take an example of, if you set up a digital service, self-service capability, you want your customers to be able to access their accounts. Everybody wants one-click access and instant
Yep.
access. So that's the kind of thing you've got to build. So how do you do that proactively, but protect actually, it is actually customer accessing the service. If you have a username and password, well, then you need a password reset process. So that's probably the weakest part of your journey. That's the thing you can focus on. So again, can you proactively, monitor that, look at that, understand that, and then when if something does go wrong, you can react quickly and manage the kind of risk out of it as well. So
Yeah.
it's always a fine balance. But my personal belief is always prevention better than cure. Others are a more kind of reactive, and we all have that feeling of, yes, we would like to take down the criminal. There's always that kind of mindset where
Of course.
as well. But operationally, cost efficiency wise, benefit wise to the company, it's kind of like, what can I prevent, and then what can I manage?
I guess there's a point within an enterprise, which is obviously adhering to compliance and adhering to regulation. But they're not necessarily tasked with, identifying who the, attacker is, then going through sort of providing evidence, and then sort of going through prosecution. I mean, that stops there, right? I mean, that's down to, the governments or the various agencies within country to sort of go and take that data and then go and prosecute. So, from an enterprise perspective, at what point do they go, okay, we've done enough now, and there's nothing more we can do, because we're not a detective agency, we're not the MI6 or GCHQ or CSA, whoever it is these days that kind of monitors that. Where does that handover happen, and how much does typically, and I appreciate there are different jurisdictions with different regulations and compliance requirements, but typically, where does that handover sort of stop?
So, I mean, it's not so much. So, from a perspective of kind of law enforcement, there are things they can pursue, there are things they can't.
Yeah,
There's levels of kind of interest that we'll have based on kind of revenue losses and impacts. As you say, there's things you have to report, there's things you have to comply to report up as well.
yeah,
Really, some of that, again, it's more of a personal view here, I suppose, but the best way to use investigative resources, and many organizations do use investigative resources, but it's not necessarily to pursue to the end game and prosecution, but it's to investigate an issue, to understand how it happened, what happened, how can you fix those, address those problems. Yes, you can pass those kind of investigations on and liaise with law enforcement and government agencies, etc. But from an organizational point of view, as you say, you don't want to be kind of throwing good resources after bad. So how do you use those effectively? You kind of say, well, in that course of kind of investigating and understanding, right, does that feed back into that then preventative process? What tools do I need? What could I have done? How could I have prevented it? What were the weaknesses were? Can they be addressed? How are they addressed? Reporting structures, monitoring structures, etc., and take that piece of analysis away. So I think in many organizations there are investigative undertakings, But it is, again, almost in an organisation drawing back from, look, yeah, we don't necessarily want to chase that down a kind of legal route, etc. Let the enforcement agencies deal with that. But actually, let's utilise that process to build in that learning information to feed back into better preventive activity.
I think what I have seen, sort of organisations that maybe take the next step is in the insurance sector. When there's insurance fraud, there tends to be a lot more onus. Maybe onus is not the right word, but a bit more focus on the insurance company to then go and either prosecute or report, whatever it may be, rather than a banking financial services institution who may have been subjected to ID fraud or a phishing attack or something like that. Is there differences in different sectors in terms of the complexities around how they deal with a fraud case, whether it be in, as I said, in a bank, an insurance company, in a payments company, for example?
I mean, kind of yes, simply on multiple levels, really. But yeah, from as you say, from a compliance or kind of regulatory understanding point of view, sometimes it's based on kind of value metric, value piece as well. Because of
Okay.
course, yes, I can have a single ID fraud, and it's not cost me, it's cost me a few dollars, but I could have several thousands of the same type of ID fraud instigated by an individual. Then I may wish to kind of work and pursue that and prosecute that, as it were, and kind of take that kind of criminal entity out of
Out of the picture there.
out of
Yeah.
the game, as it were. Yeah, no, indeed. But the kind of situation is, how can you do that? I think the difficulty now with any of these kind of things is actually, I say, that cross jurisdictional thing. So in the digital world, again, it's your attacker may be based in Asia Pacific or Latin America. They may be routing their activities and spreading their activities and have a center in the US, a center in Europe, and a center in APAC, initiating attack against someone in South Africa.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's how do you can't, as an organization, actually pursue that really at all. You might be able to get the end person who is manipulating it on the ground in South Africa, but it's kind of it's a small part of the game. Which is why I say you kind of assess it from a almost a financial and operational point of view of kind of the old cost benefit analysis of
Yep.
right, how much would I spend pursuing that, versus brand and impact and scale and that kind of thing, versus what I need to do, need to report, versus what I can then take back internally and actually operationally improve. You do get those kind of variations in terms of kind of different industries. Some of that as well is, and dare I say this, it may be incorrect to say this, is sometimes it's just the mentality of those industries as well, because of older traditional interests are used to working in this kind of way and kind of manner, and maybe are used to pursuing kind of operational kind of claims on that side and pursuing kind of legal entities. Whereas actually, to be in the modern world and digital world, it's got to be, I say, you've got to turn it back to the preventative aspect.
Yeah, Jason, you mentioned the cost, and I was blown away with your colleague Johnny when he did his opening keynote, and he presented some of the numbers in terms of the global cost of compliance. It was staggering. I'm going to try and remember that number, but I'm probably going to get it wrong. But I remember looking at the stage, going, "Really? Like that seems astronomical." And is a lot of that going towards actually being compliant, or is it going towards fighting things like fraud and AML and what have you? Is there a difference, or is that just a lump sum in terms of sort of the industry? Into was it? I can't remember what the number was.
So we look at a couple of things. So we do two reports actually. So I mean,
Yeah.
and they're both just been released. So the total cost of compliance and the total cost of fraud.
Right. Okay.
So from that perspective, what we're looking at is, there's aspects you have to do to comply. So you have to put in systems, capabilities, personnel, operational costs, etc.
Sure.
Then there's the kind of when we kind of take fraud as an example. If I measure a fraud, I'm a if I'm a telecoms company, somebody does an identity fraud, takes a $1,500 iPhone. The cost of my fraud is $1,500. Well, actually, no, it's not, because if you think about it, you've paid to advertise, market, and sell to that individual. You've got a cost of kind of monitoring your tools to look for identity fraud in the first place. Then you've got the situation of kind of liability. If those frauds go to a certain scale, well, maybe your cost of getting replacement equipment, replacement goods is going to be more. You might have fines because you take, using, stolen credit cards. You might get fines from Visa or MasterCard, or compliance fines because you're not doing your KYC properly. All these kind of, and then you've got the brand impact of the consumer's unhappy, the person whose identity is being used potentially is unhappy and not going to sign business with you if you can't verify them properly in the first place. So there's all these kind of little extra impacts that add up. So, my $1,500 fraud actually could be 4 times that. It could be, it costing me each and every fraud cost me eight or nine,
Wow.
six, eight, nine, $10,000 kind of thing. So that's the kind of situation we see that, and we look at that from a different aspects, different industries, different countries, and see what those kind of cost of compliance, cost of fraud cases really are, to give people an understanding. So when I report, as I say, a revenue fraud of $100,000, actually it's probably cost me four to 5 times that, because of all the knock-on costs that are internally, say, whether that's operational, whether that's compliance-wise and systems needs, or whether that's just pure brand and impact, reputational needs, customer churn. One of the companies I used to work for when I was running kind of fraud department, we had a big focus on customer retention and customer churn and the impacts of fraud on that. And you showed if you can reduce kind of those impacts by 0.5%, it would add millions to your bottom line because of good customers' revenue, the average revenue per customer, and what you kind of bring back to the organization. So it is a kind of factor you've got to try and understand now. And again, we tend to, in the past, traditional approaches have tend to look at the cost of, well, what did I lose to that fraud? It was 3,000. Well, that's it. And so we're kind of basically underreporting actually the impacts.
Yeah.
So when you come to justifying a fraud department as well, you're underreporting the kind of benefits you're bringing to the business if you're only reporting the things that you lost.
That's interesting. I'd never really thought of it that way in terms of sort of the cost benefit of doing that for customer retention and brand loyalty. I guess if you're going out to market saying as a brand, we have, I don't know, if it's possible, zero fraud in the last 12 months, and our process is not only slick and fast, and we can onboard you, but it's also, absolutely, safe as houses, if that's the right expression to use. I don't know these days. Is houses safe? Who knows? Especially not if you're in Dubai last week with the rain. But anyway, then I guess there is that sort of different narrative where you're looking at the cost of implementing fraud detection systems and the right sort of KYC solutions and AML solutions. And actually, is this just a cost, or is there a benefit of doing this? And can I relate that back to retention, onboarding, new logo, new customer, etc., etc.? I'd never even thought of that. Interesting.
Yeah, no, and it is, as I say. So going back to that kind of, it's a mentality approach. And again,
Yeah,
being in the industry a while, it used to be the case of the fraud team, the fraud operation was a cost to the business. It's not providing anything. They're the guys who say no, you can't do X, Y, or
yeah,
Z.
yeah, yeah.
But actually, it's kind of turning that around. And again, coming to the changes. The changes is digitalization. In the digital world, it's all about customer experience. The best apps and services you utilize are the ones that give you the smoothest, slickest, simplest customer experience.
Absolutely.
So, as a fraud control, if you introduce pain into that experience, then you're causing a problem. Customers won't convert, customers won't consume, customers will go elsewhere because it's too painful to add a service or change a service, etc. So, from a fraud department, you've got to be more customer service aware and customer orientated than ever before.
Yeah,
And again, that's what, from a Lexis point of view, that's what we try and give our customers. We try and give the ability to actually have tools and systems that are non-intrusive, that are not impacting that customer experience, but allowing them to still manage and monitor the customer journey and be preventative in terms of fraud and awareness of risk, which is the kind of that's what you want as the ideal goal. Everybody wants a frictionless, horrible word, frictionless one-click kind of journey
yeah,
in the digital space, but you need to do that. How do you do that securely? And again, you've probably experienced it. I experienced it. There are some companies that do it well. There are some companies that do it very badly. You go into the app and you have to do another verification and step out, and then go back in and do another verification because you want to change something else, etc. That kind of journey is painful. And if you're introducing that as a kind of fraud mechanism, you're asking for X, you're asking for Y, you're doing this validation,
yeah.
you're doing this step up. You kind of at the end, you got to go, no, I just want to do what I wanted to do. Let me do it, and you'll go elsewhere.
It's like
So
take your glasses
if
off,
you
put
can
your
just
glasses on, turn to the left, turn to the right, jump
yeah,
up and down. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Been there.
If you can get away from that kind of experience, but still maintain your preventative capability, your kind of risk, whatever your risk appetite is, but maintain it at that level, then of course that's where the benefits come in.
Do you think that consumers are becoming more savvy? So, listen, I'm a fintech geek, right? So I'm probably an exception to the rule. But if I'm signing up to a fintech platform, regardless of what it is, and the process is too easy. Okay, and I can give a couple of examples, not by name, but certainly on some of crypto wallets and what have you. It's actually too easy, and for me, I'm going, ooh, okay, this was too easy, and I could, if I had malicious intent, I could probably find a way around this. Are you seeing that from consumers? I don't know whether you can get consumer data, because I appreciate your clients are essentially
Yeah,
the the enterprise. Is that in specific markets, or is that just a non-issue whatsoever, and people just want this
so
one click?
no, I mean it is an issue, and it is an understanding, and I've done it both ways. So yeah, I say setting up fraud operations for teams and kind of putting in those and working with our customer experience and digital services departments to launch services. It is something that we see, and again, even us at Lexis, without working with our customers and seeing what they need to implement and control. So yeah, you
Yeah,
have that situation. Look, yeah, everybody says they want kind of passwordless, frictionless authentication. You know, we've worked with one of our customers previously, and kind of we did that for their app, and basically going into the app, we could almost give you instant access to the app, but the customers were kind of concerned that actually that instant access was, as you say, too easy.
yeah,
So for this particular customer, we're kind of saying, we've made the decision in a few milliseconds, but actually we'll put a 3-second wheel of death on the front screen to say you are being verified. Just to, but the decision was made in 30 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, whatever it may be.
yeah,
But
sure,
actually, they're holding on that screen, and they actually did some customer testing and customer kind of validation, and they found kind of the 3-second hold was the ultimate for their customers. That actually, yes, I feel secure, and now I can access the app rather than actually instantaneous. Yeah, we could have given them instantaneous access.
yeah,
So it is something you can do, and good organisations will do that kind of customer groundwork, customer testing, and validate. What kind of experience. There's the ultimate customer experience, but then there's the too open customer experience because, as you say, customers start to question, well, that was too easy. Are you actually validating me? Could anybody do this? So you
exactly,
have to give them that kind of pause to hold, but you don't want that pause to be 10 seconds because then they get frustrated and first world problems of, what do you mean it's not working in 10, immediately? So, so it's balancing that aspect. So consumers are getting more, I won't say necessarily savvy, but they're aware of, actually, are things too easy?
mm,
But then again, you can make it too difficult. As soon as you do that step up and you have to go to a text message or step up and go out the app, then it's painful. And then they don't want, that's what they don't want. So, balancing that kind of, risk reward kind of interaction with the customer is kind of essential now.
yeah,
But it is also important, I say, we see that in terms of customer conversion rates. And if you can do it, again, should we say silently, invisible kind of verifications, that it can improve your conversion rates and your sales rates. So as you as an organization, you're kind of thinking, yes, that's what I want. I want better sales. I want better operations. But can I do that at the same time and doing kind of minimal fraud rates as well? And so I want the best of both worlds. I want to reduce my fraud rates, reduce my kind of indications, but I want the experience to be absolutely top notch.
And then from a LNRS perspective, you obviously came up with this solution of this kind of 3-second delay in one user case. It must be quite challenging because you have got this dichotomy between, listen, we want something really, really slick and really, really fast, and we want to onboard as many, new customers or merchants or whoever it may be as quick as we possibly can. But we also need to satisfy regulations and compliance. From an NRS perspective, by the way, I only found out that acronym through Johnny the other day because I'd always been saying LexisNexis Risk Solutions. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
Anyway, from your perspective, how do you come up and I suppose strategize with your clients and say, right, you are a tier one bank, for example, and you have to conform to all of this, whereas you, on the other hand, are a PSP, and your list of requirements are still quite large, but they're not as arduous as the bank. So, is there a bit of sort of solutioning between the different types of organisations to say, actually, you can do that, but actually, Mr. Bank or Mrs. Bank, you can't do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a balance of technology solutions and, as you say, kind of customer engagement. So,
Yeah,
regarding our, the solutions we provide, kind of very proud to say, they're very much kind of, frictionless, non-intrusive kind of solutions from a fraud perspective. So they can run in the background, analyze what's going on, indicate what's going on. And then we work with our customers on setting up that best balance of kind of, I would say, operational process. So we see, they say, what happens in tier 1 banks, tier 2 banks, payment organizations, etc. We've got best practice policy we can bring in and kind of say, this is advise on how how you could work, how you should work, how we see it working elsewhere, kind of application of kind of policies and controls of how that can be utilized effectively. So from that perspective, it's that kind of engagement to understand their business, but taking the it's a vast organization we have now, a vast experience we have now with lots of customers who can bring that straight to the table.
Yeah.
But the technology gives them that capability, and that's some of the exciting things, and the things we're working on, and things we released over the last couple of years has been the kind of capability of that technology to understand, particularly in the digital world, kind of understand the digital personas, understand behavioral intelligence, how a user interacts, with their app, with their phone, with their web pages, etc., and kind of build from things from that perspective to be kind of really strong in identifying who the genuine customer is, and then obviously defining risk. And this is where really the shift is as well, because you used to buy fraud tools to find fraud, but actually we're providing tools now that actually can provide customer trust. So actually, because 99% of your customers hopefully are very, very good, and then 1% are bad that you want to identify. But so we kind of switch it around. So if you can recognize and understand and build a picture of that 99 good percentage, that 1% easily stands out. Now that's the easy part of the job. What you can then do is obviously then how you manage that 99%. Do you give them improved customer experience? Do you give them a fast track journey because it's a really trusted customer who's interacted with you lots of times and you're absolutely confident that it is that person interacting? Fast track them. Don't ask them the normal questions. Just give them the experience they need and want, versus those that kind of in the middle, or kind of those that kind of showing kind of aspects of risk or concern. And then you can choose, always apply, a risk-based approach, as they call it. Apply a risk-based approach of how you deal with those little groups of customers. Can you identify exceptions, anomalies? Because anomaly on an interaction on a web page could be somebody using a bot or a script and attacking that web page in a particular way. Could be an individual who's found a shortcut in how to do something. But it could be a web design page. You've done a release on your web design page, and suddenly customers are totally behaving in a totally different way to what they used to, interact with your web page, and not going through the process, or always dropping out. And that could be an indication that actually this is a bad customer experience. So actually quickly address this and get it arranged. It's not just the fraud aspect anymore. But from that perspective, it is that shift of kind of real balance of, I like to kind of phrase it kind of trust, experience, risk. Can you identify the trust level of that transaction, of that interaction, of that person, of that digital persona, device, or whatever is interacting with you, or how to establish a trust and your trust to them, as it were, as well. So if you develop the scale of trust, then you can apply the level of experience, and by applying the right level of experience, depending on the trust level, then that determines the risk profile of that individual as well. So you can manage it on those kind of 3 levels. And that really apply that to any interaction on your customer journey point. So that applies to signing up new customers. What level of trust can I apply? Does it look like a good new identity? Does it have any historical problems, etc.? Profile of the individual, profile of the digital persona. Okay, then we can give it this experience journey. We can short track some of the interactions, do the ones we need to do, because there's always that compliance angle, but actually make that as smooth as possible. And then, we can apply that into that risk category and offer these products and services based on that risk category. But you can do that for logging in. You can do that for changing the details on your account, resetting your password. You can do that for kind of making payments, buying goods, transferring money. It's that trust aspect. What experience do you need to give them at that kind of service? And then how do we manage the risk and apply the risk categorization at the end of it?
And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong here, please, Jason, but from a device perspective, you look at, your phones now, laptops, they're biometric, they're quite hard for someone just to, again, correct me if I'm wrong, just to sort of walk next to the street and sort of clone your device or clone your iPhone or your Samsung and what have you. So when you are looking at this sort of analytical behavior of people logging in or maybe not signing up but logging in, when you've got historic information about sort of keystrokes or the way they hold their phone or the way that they type maybe with one thumb rather than two thumbs, are all of these data points taken into consideration as part of sort of fraud detection within your suite of services that you offer your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, we've launched over the last year our kind of behavioral intelligence solution or behavioral biometric solution. I won't use the term biometric because that confuses people because biometric tends to think thumbprints or face prints, but behavioral intelligence is exactly as you say, how you type, how you hold, how you press, how you swipe, two fingers, one finger, left hand, right hand kind of scenario.
Yeah.
That is kind of an intelligence data point. And as you say, very rightly, logging in, for example, how do you log into that web page? Well, this is me logging into that web page or logging into the app every day. This is how I type my password. This is how I type. So it's not what I type, but how I type.
Sure.
So from that perspective, it kind of eliminates kind of that, again, that personal kind of data privacy aspect because we're not looking at those details. We're looking at actually how they interact. Now, the great thing here is, like, as averse to standard biometrics, and you kind of touched upon it, things like generative AI, deep fakes, voice fakes, etc., are coming in that kind of situation. So if you have a recording of my voice, you can create a simulated version.
Yep.
What you can't do is you can't create a simulated version of how I interact on your screen. So on an app screen, so how hard I press, how I swipe, doing, and it's not, it's doing that type of transaction because how I do a payment is very different to how I do a social media scrolling and posting. It's very different to how I write an email. It's very different to how I, watch, and interact with videos or whatever on a media site.
Sure.
So each interaction kind of aspect or is unique and unique for me. But I have a pattern of how I do that unique interaction. And if you can learn those patterns, learn those behaviors, learn those factors, you can build a trust element up there. So let's use a simple example. Me typing on a keyboard, I type in, I'm a terrible typist. I'm two finger most of the time
Yeah.
typist. So, I type my email address out in a certain way. As I log into that page, every other day, that pattern is kind of consistent. Yeah. Now, there are going to be variances, but I'll be able to put, how do so me, lovely double barrel, how do I do my first name? How do I do my second name? My LexisNexis Risk Solutions email address, it's a long email address. So there's lots of typing going on. So I can build up that kind of characteristics of, do I lift off that key before I press this key? Do I use a shortcut key? How do I do the hyphen in my surname? Do I have to pause, etc.? I can build a profile on that interaction and kind of say, okay, I am now happy if this is how Jason interacts on my login page. So when he logs in, proves that I can use that pattern analysis to understand what is going on. So if then you get my email address and you're typing it in, you might be a beautiful multi-fingered keyboardist and just typing it in nice and slick and smoothly.
Sure.
Or you might be looking off screen and just checking the spelling. Is it ERS? Is it ARS? Oh, let me go and correct that because I've done it wrong, etc. Your pattern of interaction is totally, is very much different. So therefore, easily identifiable from a kind of trust risk perspective to say, okay, that one's trusted, let them have access. This one's untrusted. Actually, let's step in and interfere with this journey and decide on, again, business practice, what we want to do. Do we stop it? Do we ask for a secondary authentication, validation, whatever it may be?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's and the beauty of that. If you take that, say, to touch screen, how hard you're pressing, are you thick thumbed, are you end of thumb kind of, touch points, those kind of interactions, be somebody who's always has your phone relatively charged up or, orientation, to your ear, away from your ear kind of scenario or fashion. All those are the kind of profile kind of pictures you can pick up as well. So that allows it to be kind of more succinct. Again, I know I'm waffling on, but I'll use another
No.
example is my daughter's at university in the States. So when she rings home, she's asking me for money, of course, usually. So therefore, I could be, take other factors into account. I'm on an active call. I open the app on an active call. I do the transaction. I'm going to send her some money. But when I'm sending her some money, it's quick, it's smooth. I know what I'm doing. It's to a beneficiary that's already set up. The usual amount is the usual amount. It's usually $30, $50 or whatever it may be. Bang. 30 seconds, and then she's gone because
Yeah.
she doesn't want to chat to me. She's gone. Yeah, that kind of scenario.
Yeah.
But if that was a fraud scenario, I may be getting a phone call, and yes, I'm being persuaded that my bank account's being compromised. I need to do something. I need to move the money to a safe account, etc. Well, I'm probably on that transaction a lot longer. I'm probably several minutes, on that page and interacting. I'm probably double, triple checking the data. Was it account number 1234? Or should I do $50 first, or $100, or all of it at once? Kind of scenario. I'm probably backwards and forwards and verifying. So my whole profile of interaction is hesitant. It's different. I'm probably stressed. I'm probably shaking. I'm probably nervous. As I say, double checking. I might be, etc. So that kind of pattern of interaction is just very, it's easy to pick up these kind of variances by that behavioral kind of pattern analysis, that behavioral intelligence analysis, and analyze, when somebody's been coerced or manipulated, or I say hesitant or unsure, compared to when I've done this process 20 times before, and this is how I normally do it. So it's a very strong. I hate to call it sexy kind of technology,
Wow.
but it's a kind of technology that's not really can't really be targeted like standard biometrics. As I say, can't get a face print or a fingerprint because they don't capture that interaction. And that's the beauty of it.
I mean, without getting too techie, because I promise I won't, but I am a nerd. The data that you're able to get, so in terms of how hard you're pressing your screen, or how you're scrolling, or how you're interacting, that comes from the handset itself, or from sort of Apple or Samsung, or Google, or whoever is providing the operating system. They provide that data to you guys. Obviously, it's anonymous. Or I would guess in some aspects it's
Well,
anonymized, but
yeah, let me step in, because on this perspective, it's not being provided to us as such. It's more as, if I have an app, if I have a web page, there's data I need to understand in order to make that web page work, or
of
that
course,
app work. So,
yeah, absolutely,
your light settings on your screen. Are you in sunlight? Are you in daylight? Are you in a dark room? So
yeah,
how light do I see? What are your font settings of? So, I've got big buttons or small buttons. So these are kind of, are you pressing here on the screen? Are you swiping left or swiping right, whichever it is for whatever app, kind of scenario? They need to record this information, capture that information in order to give you a functioning web page.
yeah,
So actually, all we're doing is capturing the freely available information on the device to make your device work. What we're using that is in a kind of different way to analyze that and understand that from an intelligent point of view of actually, the consistency of that interaction, the validation of that interaction, and then combine that with, your profile of interactions, previously, and how you've interacted as well, to kind of build that kind of profile of understanding and capability to
mm-hmm.
understand that interaction. So that means it's kind of, say it's kind of, kind of non-intrusive, and from you as a user, it doesn't impact your experience. It doesn't actually, you don't have to, there's no other software in there, there's no steps or balances in there. It's what if you want to use that app, you need these capabilities to work. What we're using those capabilities in an intelligent way to help you from a fraud perspective.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and certainly if you look again, I'm not sure sort of in Europe whether this is the same sort of challenge that the they have over there. But when I talk to the older generation here in South Africa, or across Africa, and we talk about having your bank account on your phone and being able to make payments on the phone, they're like, oh, no, 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 no. Listen, that's not safe, right? I know my girlfriend's father. He will not have a banking app or a card on his phone because he feels it's unsafe. Do you feel that if banks, if financial services organizations were able to explain what you've just explained in terms of the level of security that goes in behind this to that audience and to that demographic, and even we're talking about the older generation, but I'm sure some of the younger generation who aren't growing up as digitally savvy, in some of the underprivileged areas of Africa, do you think educating people around, actually, this is why it's so secure? It's not just putting a PIN number in here, where someone can hold, something to your head and say, right, give me your PIN number. It's way more advanced than that. Do you think that would help adoption of financial services, fintech as a whole?
Yeah, I think education is key, and it is coming. We're seeing it in some of the markets in Europe, for example. So you see some of the major banks in the UK. Their lead advertising on TV now is actually fraud advertising. So advertising about fraud and
Oh,
advertising, we won't contact you to ask you for your password. We won't reach out to you for this, etc. You know, just because it shows the number, don't believe that's the number. We won't. So there's those kind of aspects of securing your identity as well. So I think that education is out there. I think a big misconception is that it's kind of old and young delineation as well. Actually, what we're finding from some of the analysis we've done in the past is actually the old generation are targeted. Yes, usually because they've got a better credit profile and revenue, you know, profile
yeah,
for the fraudsters to target because there's more money there. But the younger generation are the ones that actually fall for the scams the most and the situations the most because they are used to sharing their media streaming passwords with their friends. Go and have a look at this, go watch this program,
yeah,
and therefore apply less security to actually those things they should be keeping secure. So yeah, the younger generation is one of those that does need educating. It's like, yes, you have a username and password, but it is absolutely vital that you don't share it and you don't use the same username and password on multiple websites, like 70% of people still do. So there are those kind of basics kind of in that kind of situation between those demographics that need to be addressed and need to be educated. Yeah, understanding the technology, as you say, well aware of that in terms of situations of elder generation, only want to do business over the phone, kind of scenario or in person. And actually, yeah, that's where they can be compromised the most nowadays as well. So it actually might be some of the weakest channels. If you put the right tools in, we would say this as Lexis, if you put the right tools in that we can give you on the digital side, actually it can be the most secure channel. It's actually harder to put some of those tools in because, on a face-to-face interaction or over the phone interaction, because you rely on kind of the human element aspect of an interaction, and obviously that's probably one of the weakest things is the human in the chain,
yeah,
because that can be, say, compromised, manipulated, colluded with, or forced. Ultimately, as we see in Africa at the moment as well, in other regions. So from that situation, can you take those steps out of the journey as well to make it better for them? But it is an educational piece, and it takes time. Change is coming. Obviously, COVID, that lovely word we want to forget about,
mm,
forced a lot on people, forced a lot of change on people. Because if you look at if you look at organisations' digital transformation programs over the years, go back 5 years ago, pre-COVID, people were talking about 10 or 20% to be digitalised, and maybe growing to 30 or 40% by 2026 or something. I can remember looking at one of the major telco global brands who've got an organisation. Theirs was, we're at 24%. We want to get to 40% by 2030. Well, within 2 years, that
yeah,
that target was achieved because they had to. So now it's the other way around. Now digital is like 70% kind of the target, the marketplace with others. So, yes, there are some markets that are more behind that as as the regions digitalize, etc. But that shift has kind of started and massively accelerated, so much so like in Western Europe it's probably 80-20 the other way now, for actual sales and operations for many organizations, which um, again, kind of going waffling on different elements. But when I used to look at fraud stats and things, you used to look at your different channels and go, oh, okay, we've got a 2% fraud rate here and a 5% fraud rate there. But if 2% was on your physical channel and 5% was on your digital channel, but your digital channel was only 10% of your business, you kind of ignored the 5% on your
sure,
10% because you're
yep,
focused on the 2% of your 9%. Of course, what's happened is in those quick years that shifted around. So where it's still 2% in the physical channel, but that's only 20% of my marketplace. Oh, and it's still 5% in my digital channel, but that's now 80% of my marketplace.
yeah,
I've got a bigger problem. So doing that, kind of getting that, and that problem is, yours as an organization, operational design, solutions and tools, but also customer education as well and customer kind of understanding. And the other throw in I'll have on education is this aspect of terminology. So I'll go back to the behavioral intelligence. We're calling it kind of behavioral intelligence or behavioral biometrics. Unfortunately, the lovely kind of research companies in the marketplace called it behavioral biometrics. Of course, now that gets confused with biometrics as like your face print, your thumbprint, and fingerprints, etc.,
yeah,
which people consider PII. Whereas actually, as you said, like we discussed, It's actually only intelligence on the information being gathered in a standard interaction. It's got nothing to do with PII. So the whole terminology we use can be a bit, laissez-faire at times and cause our own kind of problems in the industry as well. So understanding actually what the technology, what the capability is, how you're applying it, how it can be used, and how it's effective is important. Is as important from an educational point of view as well, particularly working with regulators and around the globe for those kind of compliance pieces. Kind of saying, look, you need to understand what behavioral intelligence is because it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And it doesn't kind of compromise the individual.
No. Jason, I've got so many other questions for you, but I'm conscious of your time and I'm conscious of the fact that you've got a flight to catch. But I think, if I've got lots of questions, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast that probably also have questions. What's the best way to get in touch with LNRS or yourself? Are you LinkedIn? Is LNRS best to contact one of the regional offices? What's the best sort of port of call for people that perhaps want some more information?
So I mean, we have a website, which is not necessarily always the best link because obviously you get the information you need. But yes, we do have kind of regional offices, within South Africa, within Africa, but across the Middle East, more or less every country around the globe now. So there's regional offices as well, sales teams you can reach out to. Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. People can reach out to me kind of on LinkedIn. And other media pieces as well. So feel free to do so from a obviously professional point of view. And our teams, my teams now are kind of tools are happy to try and work with both organisations to help and kind of regulatory bodies, etc., to help kind of set the standards going forward.
Fantastic. And before we go, because if I don't mention this, your head of marketing in South Africa is going to chop my head off. But ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you here. This is the Money Laundering and Terror Financing book. I should call it a Bible, actually, produced by LNRS. I said to Jason at the beginning, listen, I've got through kind of the first paragraph, and I'm going to be reading this, I promise. And I promised Gary that I would give this a bit of a plug. So, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. Listen, thanks so much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the well in your travels, and hopefully we can catch up soon. It'd be great to see sort of the next report that comes out. Maybe we can have a chat about that and see what the findings are.
No, indeed, and I think we have one due. So as I mentioned, again, quick plug as it were. So we've got our total cost of fraud report out there, the total cost of compliance report. They're both available on the website. And shortly, in the next few weeks, we'll be releasing our latest cybercrime report. So that's a report on the fraud stats across our digital identity network. That will be coming out for the whole year of 2023 stats analysis, and it's usually a kind of good insight and good read to what's going on.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks so much again. I'll let you get back to your lovely hotel room at Heathrow Airport. Lovely to see you, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.